Hello, everybody. We seem to be recording. I hope that's all going well. Yes, it does seem to be. I thought I'd have a little chat to you about something a little bit different. This is an article that I sent in to David Vance because he welcomes you to have a write about something that you're passionate about and send it in, and then he publishes it. So he's published my one on 15-minute cities. I did one on Isabel Oakeshott and the Matt Hancock WhatsApps, and I did one on the Gary Lineker thing and why it's all just a massive distraction and no one should have been paying any attention to it whatsoever. So I thought I'd just have a little go through the article with you. Why not? Because it's still, the talk about refugees is still somewhat in the news, even though the Gary Lineker side of it has luckily abated. But I thought we'd have a little chat about it anyway. I mean, the first thing that I want to say is, was it this Lineker was saying something about the most vulnerable in scratching my head here. Men between the 15 and 30 are now the most vulnerable people. I'm sorry, children are vulnerable, babies are vulnerable, the disabled are extremely vulnerable, elderly people are vulnerable. The least vulnerable group in society are men aged between 15 and, say, 30, 35, especially when they've been living in a camp, the Calais camp. They are tough. We are talking about hardened people who are survivors and are probably the least vulnerable anyway. They're used to dealing with human traffickers. They've got money to pay human traffickers. They can survive the journey across the channel. We're not talking about vulnerable people. So let me go. I won't read verbatim because that's a bit boring. I'll put the link up to my article here, but I started off by saying, when it comes to Gary Lineker and the others, whether it's Alan Shearer or Ian Wright or whoever, they're not aware of too many things. They know what they know, if you know what I mean. Do ya? And I just feel the whole Lineker tweet was an absolute distraction for more important news, like the WhatsApp messages. I mean, in a way, they also are a little bit of distraction, but I think it was more productive for us as a society to have revealed to us the kind of conversations that go on in our government, particularly regarding abuse of public office, propaganda, misinformation, medical misinformation, etc., etc. So the Lineker furore totally let Matt Hancock off the hook, because instead of people looking at that important issue, which would lead to other important issues if they followed the threads, we had them hissing and booing and getting themselves all excited about this stupid Lineker tweet, which dominated the news cycle, even though it's not going to shift the dial one bit on any important issue. By the few days, it'll be totally forgotten. It already is with this whole banking collapse thing. By the way, JP Morgan probably going to go belly up, just a little heads up there. So I actually said the story is not only a distraction, it helps the government because it reinforces this false notion that the government are actually trying to reduce illegal immigration, which they aren't. And it also distracts from the fact that the migrants that come across on the boat, although that sector of illegal immigration is rising exponentially, it's by no means the biggest because far more people are coming in through the ports and the airports particularly. So it focused the attention slightly on that when there's lots of different avenues for illegal immigration. It's also a false dichotomy because both Lineker and the government and the opposition parties are totally for mass immigration and open borders, one overtly, the other maybe a bit covertly. The government fund all the charities which help bring these refugees over. They create the incentive. They almost lure these people over by laying on the extraordinary benefits, the hotel accommodation, the promise of housing, the pocket money, etc., etc., free dental, free medical. I mean, who wouldn't want to come? Talk about an incentive to come. And then the government conceal that they're actively encouraging this by having these made-to-fail policies like Rwanda and the more ridiculous ones about armoured jet skis. I mean, only the densest people would have believed that. They are fully signed up to open borders policies, and like David Vance mentioned, since Theresa May signed the Barcelona Declaration on international immigration, whatever they called it, open borders, whatever it was called, it was the Barcelona Declaration. It was that exact moment when channel crossings went from a few hundred a year to thousands to soon to be 100,000 a year. Now, the whole Gary Lineker tweet reinforced the idea that these people are actually refugees, because it was based on, oh, refugees, should they come? Should they be vetted? They are not refugees. The vast majority of them come from Kurdistan and Albania. There hasn't been a war in Albania for 70 years. Kurdistan is virtually a US proxy state. Both Kurdistan and Albania are protected states by NATO and the UN. It is absolutely impossible that anyone there is being persecuted unless it's NATO persecuting them. They are not refugees. And by the time anyone gets to France, they are not refugees at that point. They are totally safe. France is a modern, fantastic country. There's now no need for them to make that perilous journey. But you'll hear the people saying, well, can you imagine how desperate they must be to make that journey? Well, first of all, how perilous is it? They probably know they're going to be picked up virtually soon and it's pretty safe. And they're coming for the benefits because they're safe in France. They could make a life there. They could make a life in Germany and other places. I mean, gosh, I don't know how people really this dumb. So I know sometimes I do watch Katie Hopkins. She talks a lot about the time when she was banned, sacked, totally eviscerated from public view and made persona non grata. Now, what she was talking about then was the boat migrants coming across the Mediterranean. And obviously, talking about that is a mortal sin when it comes to the New World Order. Because Katie does mention that although a lot of people have been allowed back on Twitter, she is not allowed because her ban is at a much higher level than other people's. She insinuates her ban stems from the government, and the government will not have her on Twitter. Why? Because she's going to highlight this issue and be effective on it as she was before. So you can see that this issue is a linchpin to the whole New World Order plan, and they do not want pushback on this issue. So Lineker's not speaking any truth to power, nothing like that's going on. He's simply creating the illusion that the government are dealing with this issue, where they're totally complicit in its continuation, and also they're the hidden hand in censoring people who do speak out against it, right? What's more is it's another opportunity to mention the Nazis, and that must never be missed, because the spectre of Nazi must be invoked as often as possible so that it maintains the power of this word, because in the old days religion was more influential, and the powers that be who were in the church in those days could manipulate people through mentioning the devil, and that would scare them into compliance. But nowadays they need only mention Hitler or the Nazis to get people back into line. They also have to keep plugging the Nazi word to demonize nationalism, and even law and order to some degree, which is key to the globalist plan, because national pride, national identity, borders, it's a major stumbling block for them. That has to go. So they have to really plug the whole Nazi thing as much as possible. Peter Hitchens obviously is talking about how Nazism is not particularly a right-wing thing, it's more a left-wing thing because it was the National Socialists. You can read up on that if you want. So I see a lot of people who kind of awake to the injectables and to the COVID thing and to the World Economic Forum. They're kind of awake to all that, but they'll put up memes saying that boat migrants are the scapegoats. They are not the problem. It's the billionaires that are the problem. It's the tax evading billionaires who abuse power, and it's the politicians, not the migrants, who are the problem, because the migrants are just victims, so we mustn't be distracted by that issue. Now, I feel that's like saying you fear the Navy and the Air Force of your enemy, but you don't fear the infantry. It's together. They're all bound together. The illegal immigration is a key plank of the globalist plan. It's Maoist because it represents the removing of the four olds, which, the olds are the old customs, old traditions, old people, old religions, old languages, old, norms, maybe old laws. It can apply to many, many different things. Don't need to be just four of them. But all these old things, old culture has to be removed so the Great Reset can take place. And illegal immigration is part of it. You can't separate it out and say, oh, well, let's not focus on that. And it's a very important, illegal immigration is also vital in the demoralization of the population strategy, which has always been key in the communist playbook. It demoralizes people because, for obvious reasons, I'm not going to go on about it, absolutely. And the illegal immigration increases the amount of the population who are dependent on the state, and people won't bite the hand that feeds them. So in closing, this Lineker Ferrari just reinforces many themes that are essential to the globalists and which distract the public and have them chasing their tails. So anyway, that was my article, and I hope you enjoy it. I could also do my one on old Isabel Oakeshott. I'll tell you what I titled it when don't want to go over it now because I've done this one, but on my one on Isabel Oakeshott, I said that my attitude to Matt Hancock was, "Oh, shut up, silly man," said the reptile with a grin. "You knew I was a snake when first you let me in. It's extraordinary to me that Matt Hancock made the mistake of giving her these WhatsApps, but were they not contrived? To me, they seem like they're all written by the same person because they all have the same kind of use of language, the tone, the composition, the timbre. I don't know. That whole thing seemed a bit fake for me. They also were very, all quite tightly grammatically correct, formulated, good punctuation, whereas people are usually more careless with the messages. They were quite lame, even that extremely lame joke about Hancock and Gay saying to Gates, "Oh, you owe me one for putting all the chips in people." No, he never made that joke. I don't believe these WhatsApps are even genuine. I think someone has sat down, concocted them all, and they're all pretty much written by the same person with something in mind, and they're just another distraction, really, to steer people away from anything slightly more incisive. Although, as I say, they're a better distraction than this, because that other distraction, the Lineker distraction, goes nowhere. It's just meant to really annoy and demoralize people.